Red Dead Redemption is by far one of, if not my favorite game to play, beaten only by Red Dead Redemption 2, which in a very rare case, the second game, which was a prequel, was actually good enough to rival and even lift up the first game onto a whole nother pedestal. This series truly does hold a place in my heart. Right there next to Metal Gear Solid 3, and I don't know, I guess like the Soul series or something. And don't get me wrong, the first Red Dead Redemption is still amazing, but is it $50 worth? Well, that's what I decided to cover in this review. Now, I've played through pretty much the entire game, beaten almost all the side quests, and obviously all the main quests. I didn't want to spend a whole nother 2 months trying to get all the challenges unlocked and all of the costumes, so I just decided to quit while I was ahead. That being said, this game, as said by Rockstar themselves, is not necessarily a port, it's a convergence, or whatever the heck they're talking about. Basically, it's a fancier name for a port. Also, with that being said, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe on the video and all that fun jazz. I do gaming reviews on here, and I try to do more like deep dive content, but I also do, these like sort of weekly uploads just to sort of patch things out in the meantime. In the future, I will be doing a long form Alan Wake video because I actually never played that game when it first came out, even though I heard a lot about it. So I'm kind of going to be going through the series blind, playing the first one and then the second one when it comes out in October. But with that being said, let's yee our last ha and let's game. First, I'll go over the story very briefly and a couple of standout moments that I liked about it. Then we'll go into more specifics about differences I noticed from this game compared to its PS3 and Xbox 360 counterpart, and then my final thoughts. Spoiler alert for the story, by the way. If you really haven't played this game, like seriously pick it up and play through it, because it is just one of those landmark games that completely changed the gaming landscape, and so was the second one. So the story starts off with John Marston, but you don't actually learn exactly what he's doing here for at least a good 2 hours until you get a couple missions under your belt. But basically these government types, specifically this guy, Agent Edgar Ross, is spearheading a campaign for the governor of this region who wants to get re-elected and wants to appear tough on crime. And it seems like the three biggest thorns that are in the governor's ass tend to be Dutch, Javier Oswales, and Bill Williamson, all former members of the Dutch Vanderlyn gang, except for Dutch, obviously. So the governor hires Edgar Ross, who instead of hiring somebody else to do the job, finds John Marston, kidnaps his family, and holds them in confinement until he kills his former gang members. I do kind of like this very first mission because it's almost kind of like John just expects to die in this sort of part. Like he's a level 1 going against like a level 50 raid boss, and he just completely gets his shit pushed in by Bill Williamson and his gang.
I implores you to go back and tell them to send someone just a little bit more impressive next time.
Well...
And that is actually something I did wonder for a while. Like, did John actually go here, like, intentionally wanting to die? Like, it is actually something I did think about for quite some time. Because, like, obviously, this is a well-armored fortress. There's no way Bill would just come out willy-nilly and fight him one-on-one. I mean, seriously, how did he really actually expect this encounter to go down? Like, he was just gonna be able to talk Bill Williamson out of this? Whatever. He's then rescued by Betty McFarlane, who's a pretty bad bitch, alright? Like, don't get me wrong, John's chick Abigail is a very bad bitch too, but, Miss McFarlane can hold her own, just saying. She's like top waifu material right here, just saying.
Once you didn't die, the doctor said you'd be fine. He got the bullets out a couple days ago.
Good.
It cost us $15.
I am never gonna financially recover from this.
Anyways, she saves you from certain death, and since you're in her debt, you do a couple missions to earn her favor. And after he pays back his debts pretty well, Bill Williamson sets fire to their barn since he hears that John is still alive. So Marston decides to make it his mission to kill him himself. He decides to head to Armadillo, where he asks for the sheriff's help, but the sheriff's already knee-deep in his own problems, so instead he points you in the direction of a snake oil salesman and a necrophile. Now, that sounds completely useless, but you would actually be surprised how useful they are in the story. You do a couple missions for the snake oil salesman, Nigel West Dickens, who introduces you to Irish, who, as you may have guessed it, is Irish, and as you also may have guessed it, is drunk as shit all the time, and as you maybe have guessed, is an arms dealer. He also seems to have a pesky memory problem, especially when it comes to paying back debts. But eventually, after reminding him enough times...
Who the hell are you?
Give me that. I'm your old friend Amnesia.
After doing a lot of missions for all of these characters, and begrudgingly winning their trust, or at least threatening them enough times, you finally convince them to assault Fort Mercer. But after the raid, you find out the princesses are in another castle. And these princesses, by the name of Bill and Javier, have hopped the border and gone to Mexico. So John pursues them over there, and I just gotta say, the ferry scene here, where you're on this runaway ferry going down the river, and you're sniping all these guys, and they're falling into the water, like, oh, it is just one of the coolest moments in the whole game. Anyways, John finds his way down to Mexico, and Irish completely fucks off out of the story and probably gets himself killed in some gutter somewhere, gripping a fifth of tequila.
These horses look fresher and healthy.
Anyways, you meet a guy named Lando Ricketts up here, who seems to be an old-fashioned gunslinger, like a legend in his time or something like that, enough to the point where John knows about him. That being said, his missions, while really awesome, and you get to unlock the final stage of Deadeye, are very short-lived, as he kind of just goes off into America to die. But around this time, you start doing some missions for this guy named DeSanta, who is the president's second in command, and you also meet the president too. And of course, they're absolute dickbags, and they absolutely have no idea why the country is revolting around them or why everything is being destroyed around them. You know, typical people in power type shit.
Ah, look at that ass, huh? Magnificent. Now save her for later, or I'll kill her and all her family. They're probably rebels anyway, huh?
You also meet the leader of the resistance, Reyes, and his wife, who he doesn't even really seem to care about or acknowledge that she's his wife. And you basically play both sides here, like you do a couple missions for DeSantis, and you do a couple missions for Reyes. And John doesn't really give a shit about the politics or anything that's really going on here. He's just essentially working both sides until one of them gives him what he wants. Which he realizes this is a terrible fucking idea when DeSanta actually betrays you. It doesn't really make any sense why he wouldn't just kill you in the church. Because, I mean, when he has you in the church here, he could have just shot John in the back of the head and called it a day. But instead, he, knocks him out and then ties him up and, is about to kill him outside. I mean, I guess it makes a little bit of sense, because, it was in a church, and I guess killing somebody in a church is, probably goes against, every single rule in any kind of book, no matter where you come from. But still. Anyways, Reyes saves you, and you do a lot more missions for him before eventually hunting down Javier Jesuelas. And it really kind of comes out of nowhere, because you're always hearing that Javier Jesuelas is right around the corner, but then it turns out he's in another place, and then you gotta go to another spot, and then another spot, and then another spot. But no, this time he's actually here. And strangely enough, you do actually have the option to capture him or kill him in this mission. And the interesting thing is that you don't have this option when it comes to Bill Williamson. The only option you have is to kill him. And not only that, but it seems like when you bring in Javier alive, Agent Edgar Ross is actually very pleased with you. But when you bring him in dead, they actually slightly chastise you, saying that the deal was that they needed him alive. But when you kill Bill Williamson, they actually don't even bat an eye at this. I'm assuming this is because they wanted one of them to give up the location of Dutch, and they thought that Javier would be a lot easier to squeeze information out of than Bill would. And there's also some slight differences as to what happens when John actually captures or kills Javier. I just love how he like spits on his fucking corpse. It's just so funny. Although, if you kill him, you actually do miss this very interesting piece of character development as John. Since in the America sections, when you're with Miss McFarland, John spills a little bit of his past to her. And while John tries to make it up like he and Dutch were these Robin Hood type figures who went around stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, she kind of chastises him and just says, well, you were just kind of using your own excuse to steal from honest people. And I think John kind of realizes that and is reflected by this line.
I hope you and your wife and children rot in hell.
You know, that life we lived is over. And when we was living it, it didn't mean nothing anyway. It was just an excuse, and we all knew.
What I knew is that you was always a puto.
And of course, John also learned the importance of learning to fight for something, instead of just trying to fight for the person who would offer you the biggest deal. Because you never know if they're actually going to follow through with it. It's kind of interesting because it's like every section, John learns something new. Anyways, then with the help of Reyes again, you find Bill Williamson, and then you can either let Reyes kill the general, or maybe he's the president, and Bill Williamson, or you can kill them both. And with your business done in Mexico, John is told to meet the federal agents back in Blackwater. I will take this moment to sort of drive home the points that have been throughout this game. It seems like the first section of the game where you are in the New Austin section is John coming to terms with what he did in the past, and how he realized that in the end he really wasn't fighting for anything noble. He was just a rebel without a cause. And if you played the second game, this point is definitely nailed home. And then in Mexico he realizes, or if you light a candle on both ends, you'll get burned in the middle. This last section of the game, I would say the main focus of it is, at least back in the day, and maybe even to a certain extent today, the amazing and scary control that the federal government has over the people of this land. They're essentially a giant gang that can kill without repercussions, and they're backed up by the US government. So if you're under their thumb, it's really not a place you want to be. But we will see these plans come to fruition later. That being said, you meet Agent Ross in Blackwater. You also do a couple missions for this wacky professor guy. I mean, this dude literally does nothing all day other than just talk about how all other races are insignificant compared to the white man and get high. You also get this very interesting character, which I wish they kind of would have branched out a little bit on, by the name of Nastas.
Nastas, come on, come in, sir. Would you like to take off your slippers? Or skin a rabbit? These savages must be spoken to simply in metaphors.
No, sir. I grew up on a reservation and attended school.
Oh, lovely.
He seems to be trying to do the right thing by being an interpreter for his specific tribe, so that his tribe and everybody else can live in harmony. But his former tribe sees him as a traitor, and he's later executed in that fashion. I kind of think he was underused, really. Like I said, he kind of seemed like a more nobler version of John. But maybe that was the point. Anyways, you meet Dutch 2 other times besides the final mission, and they're actually pretty intense scenes and very interesting as well. Just like in this one mission, Dutch literally tells him that he's gonna kill him and the professor, and when he asks why, he doesn't even really know. He's just kind of like, well, because we want to, Like, there's literally nothing else for them to do other than just lash out.
You and your friend there, the professor, we're gonna kill the both of you.
Why you want to do a thing like that?
I don't know. Sport, I guess.
Anyways, after some shenanigans and Dutch getting away, Agent Ross and the US military decide to actually assault Dutch's stronghold. And this is a pretty intense section. You mow down a crap ton of enemies, and you think you get your climactic final showdown with the big baddie, but really you're robbed of that. By the time you actually get to Dutch, he's already lost. He's worn out and beaten down by life. And as much of a scumbag as Dutch is, he is quite the poetic.
We can't fight change. Can't fight gravity. We can't fight nothing. My whole life, all I ever did was fight.
Then give up, Dutch.
But I can't give up, neither. I can't fight my own nature. That's a paradox, John.
Of him talking. I don't know what it is, but just hearing Dutch talk about his paradoxical nature, about how you can't fight anything, like you can't fight change, you can't fight gravity like he says, but at the same time he also can't fight his own nature of wanting to fight. Like, I just don't know. It just gives me chills just thinking about it right now. At the end of the day, he knows that his story is written, but he decides to choose the ending. Anyways, with John's obligations to the federal government null and void, they return his family back to him. And for this last section of the game is actually really cool. Now, you can't switch out of this rancher costume, which I always thought was kind of dumb, but I also kind of see why now, because it's like he's left his old life behind. He's no longer a ruthless gunslinger. He doesn't wear his bounty hunter outfit. He doesn't wear the deadly assassin uniform. He doesn't wear the elegant suit and scam people out of poker games. He's a changed man. He's trying to be a changed man. You just kind of do regular run-of-the-mill things, like bring your products into town, wrangle cows and horses, teach your son how to hunt. But you do feel kind of like John's son, Jack, is still a little distant towards him. And I mean, seeing Red Dead Redemption 2, it definitely makes sense. But at the same time, you do kind of see how that father-son relationship is slowly being built up. And I will admit this section is really nice. It's just a slice of life with Abigail, Jack, and their crazy house guest uncle. Now don't get me wrong, real quick here, I never understood why John was so mean to Uncle. I mean, it seemed like he was kind of lazy, and I just thought, well, if that's the case, why doesn't he just kick him out at that point? And this is actually a good example of why Red Dead Redemption 2 is an amazing sequel, or I guess prequel, to this game, because it not only is an amazing story in and of itself, but it literally takes the previous story and throws it up to a whole nother level, which is extremely rare to be able to do, especially from the crap that we've seen in Hollywood nowadays, with them remaking everything. Let me explain. So, in Red Dead Redemption 2, which of course takes place before the events of the first game, after John has left the gang, he goes into town in order to get a loan for his house. And he runs into Uncle, and they get the loan. And John really wants to build this house so he can prove to Abigail that he's serious about changing his life. But he can't do it alone. So, with the help of Uncle and Charles, they build the house up. But one day, the Skinner brothers, which are sort of like a cannibalistic, which if I remember correctly, they're kind of like cannibalistic mountain men, kind of like the night folk north of Saint Denis. Anyways, they kidnap Uncle, and John and Charles track them into the forest. When they come across the Skinner brothers' camp, Uncle is literally being roasted alive while they're interrogating him as to the location of John, since he did a job where he escorted some cargo somewhere and he ended up killing over about 20 of them. Anyways, he rescues Uncle, and on the ride back, he says to him that if Uncle lives, he can stay at his house for as long as he wants. And man, when that moment happened in the second game, man, it was just such a touching moment, because it's like, that's why. Like, he may be an absolute dick to Uncle, like bordering on being abusive towards him, or at least verbally abusive towards him, but he still loves him deep down, and he still respects him enough to keep him at the farm. And it makes sense why he's never gotten anyone else, even though Uncle is always drunk and lazy as hell. But yeah, that's my quick rant as to why the second game makes the first game just that much better. Anyways, it's an amazing section, but unfortunately, the good times do not last. One day, seemingly out of the blue, I mean, it's actually pretty weird, because like the mission we had before this was John rescuing Jack from a bear, and I don't know, the pacing just seemed kind of weird. I just would have expected there to be like maybe like a, you know, like a fishing mission or something like that. I know fishing wasn't introduced until the second game, but still, you know, some other activity just to bond with Jack a little bit. I mean, by the way this mission starts, you wouldn't even guess that it was the final mission. But anyways, Uncle sees something off in the tree line and calls John over, and John sees that it's Agent Edgar Ross and his goons, and he orders everybody to get into the house except for Uncle, and they hold off as long as they can. Abigail, Jack, and John retreat into the barn, and John says Jack and Abigail off while he stays behind and sacrifices himself for them. Truly one of the most shocking scenes in video game history. Jack then comes back, buries his father, and takes on the mantle of being the man of the house. 4 years later, at least I think it was 3 or 4 years later, his mom dies, and he buries her right next to where John's buried, and he goes off to hunt the man who killed his father. And this takes place in the form of a side mission, which technically you don't even need to complete this side mission in order to get 100% in the game. At least I think it does. Either that or that video I saw of somebody doing this mission with the Federal Bureau outfit was faked or glitched, since you need to complete the game 100% in order to get that. But regardless, Jack tracks down Edgar Ross and kills him. Along the way, he does talk to a government agent, Edgar Ross's wife, and his brother. So, you know, he definitely did leave a trail of witnesses behind him. And if we ever did get a Red Dead Redemption 3, it would be really awesome. Now, this is just like kind of theory time, so whatever, take it with a grain of salt. But how awesome would it be if for Red Dead Redemption 3, we got Jack Marston paying for the crimes of killing Edgar Ross by going to World War I? Oh, man, wouldn't that just be crazy? And then they could show the horrors of World War I. I don't know. I think it would be an interesting premise. Obviously, they would have to move away from the whole Western setting, but I don't know, I don't know. Maybe it would be an interesting direction. That's all I'm going to say. The only other thing I want to mention here before I get into my final thoughts is the side mission, I Know You. Obviously, this is one of the craziest side missions where you can actually complete it in different ways. and the strange man actually has different responses for you depending on what you do. And I remember when I was younger and I saw this final scene of John meeting him and he shoots him in the back. Like, I never understood why he did that, but it actually makes a lot of sense because not only is this spot the exact spot where he would be buried after he died, but this is like right next to his house. So obviously he would be extremely concerned if somebody was right next to his house. And then I've also read some Reddit comments about how he shoots him 3 times and then the 4th shot jams, and this is supposed to be symbolic of him, Abigail, and Uncle dying, and then the jam is supposed to represent like Jack surviving, I guess. But I don't know, it could just be a bunch of BS, but it is an interesting thing to ponder. Now that all the story's out of the way, what I think about this port as a whole? Well, it's pretty much the exact same. I mean, they literally didn't do a single thing. They said it's a convergence, so it's not like necessarily a port, but it's just a damn port, okay? And you wanna know why I know that they did the bare minimum when it came to this damn port? Is because I was experiencing bugs and glitches that are still in the damn game. Like, for instance, when I get to Mexico, I realize, wait a minute, John doesn't have any gloves. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I look and I remember because John always wears these really cool looking gloves. And when you're wearing the Duster outfit and he doesn't have his marksman gloves on, he looks kind of like a dweeb. Because I remember he actually did have the gloves on the last time I checked. And for some reason, he didn't have it on. And I know that he seems to take off his gloves when he would play poker. Well, it turns out that this is actually a glitch that was in the original game. That's right. This glitch, which has been in the game since it first came out, is in the fucking port. That's right. They still haven't fixed this crap. Like, that level of incompetence is just absolutely mind-boggling. And by the way to fix this is apparently you go and play like a game of 5-finger fillet, and apparently it will reset it. I don't know about you, but I think it maybe even adds some extra bugs on here because I know that I saw some side-by-side comparisons of this game, and it seemed like there was actually more shrubbery around the area, which I thought, okay, that's kind of cool. But then whenever I set up camp anywhere in this game, the shrubs are always clipping through the damn fire. Did they seriously just throw a bunch of shrubbery all over the place and just call it a day? Like, if so, that is just extremely lazy, and it just goes to show that Rockstar may not necessarily be themselves. I mean, obviously for GTA 6, they're gonna pull out all the stops, and we'll have to see how that game handles, but, like, they're on some thin fucking ice here, okay? Thin fucking ice. That being said, what did I think about this game as a whole? Well, the game is just a masterpiece, okay? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, okay? The game's amazing. You're gonna have a fun time playing it, especially if you never bought it for the original consoles. And of course it comes with Undead Nightmare, and I don't know, I mean, maybe I'll make a separate review for that. Maybe I won't, I don't know. I probably won't unless if there's like some demand for it, but I mean, I'm pretty sure there won't be. But regardless, that expansion is very fun. I mean, it's essentially Red Dead Redemption, but the comedy is cranked up to 11 and then the knob is ripped off. Like, it is absolutely hilarious. Like a very nice Grimehouse type film. That being said, this game is definitely one of the greatest games of all time. So I would have to put it up there. I mean, it's kind of hard to really put a number on this because, you know, revisiting this, like, I mean, obviously if it was back in the day when this game first came out, this would be a 10 out of 10, no doubt. But I don't know. I would have to maybe label it like a 9. I mean, there's just like a little thing that just is keeping me from giving it a 10 out of 10. But truthfully, it is an amazing game and it deserves some respect. So, you know, definitely pick it up if you haven't. But if you don't want to support Rockstar in this way, like, that's completely understandable. I would also recommend, if you don't want to support Rockstar in that way, just go to your local retro video game store and just pick up a copy for like, I don't know, like 25-30 bucks for like the Ultra Edition or whatever it is. You know, it's got all of the DLC in it and all that stuff. And then on top of that, you can play the multiplayer, which the multiplayer is amazing. Way better than Red Dead Online 2. I mean, even though I love the online to that, it still just doesn't beat the amount of fun I had in the original. I mean, you could go around and just do whatever you wanted. But anyways, that's besides the point. I hope you enjoyed the review. If you liked what you heard, or if you didn't like what you heard, it'd be much appreciated if you could like, comment, subscribe, all that fun jazz. I don't know. As I said, I'm probably going to do an Alan Wake remastered review next. It's going to be interesting because, like I said, I've never played through it, and I've only seen some of the gameplay, like every here and there I've seen it. So I'm actually kind of curious to see what all the hubbub is about. And then maybe for an October game, I might do Oxenfree and Oxenfree 2. But I don't know, I still have some deciding to do. With that being said, alright, well, that's it. Video's over. Peace.
Our time has passed, John.